Hello, everyone. Welcome back to season 3 of What's Spinnin' here at 45 Drives. You're joined today by myself, Brett Kelly, hosting. Mitch Hall is busy working away somewhere else, so I said, "Ooh, I'll do it." And today we are joined by a great guest, Rich Teslow from Two Guys Tech. And Rich is a seasoned senior security engineer. He's got decades in the IT industry, dedicated his career, has done a lot of different stuff, particularly security, infrastructure architecture, everything. And on the other side of him, a great YouTube creator, active in the home lab community and really interesting videos. I particularly loved his breakdown of his home lab and everything, but we'll get into that. Anyway, Rich is here with us. Rich, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for the opportunity to hang out with you guys. That's great.
That's awesome. Yeah. So, we'll just dive right into it. So, for those who have followed along before, whenever we get a new guest on, we love to just dive right into the origin story. What got them into their passion of technology and then YouTube creation and everything like that? Because those two always seem to go hand in hand. The post production, creativity, teaching, and then all the tech needed to drive it. So. I'll dive right in, Rich. When did you get your early interest for the tech, and more specifically for computers and home labbing?
You know, I imagine like a lot of people who are nerds to their core. For me, it started really, really, really young.
Yeah.
Like my most far off memory is being a kid and having my dad hand me an old car stereo that he'd replaced with a screwdriver and said, go to town, figure out how it works. And that really just kind of like lit this fire of this passion, wanting to know how things worked, right? How they're engineered, how they're designed, and I destroyed a lot of toys as a child.
Yeah, I hear
Yeah,
that.
yeah. And then from that point on, like being a child of the '90s, really was like this early heyday, and like when you could start to build your own computers. There was a giant like computer shopper magazine that was just
Hmm.
like 3 or 4 inches thick, just this massive thing full of all these parts and stuff. And back then, trying to build computers was not about just like which components are the best price for what you want to do,
Hmm.
but like, does this thing work? Is it compatible? Is it even gonna fit? Right.
Yeah,
So, you know, back then in the late 386 and the early 486 era, you had Windows 95, right? 98 in the later end of it. And those were like the uh the best you could do back then. So a lot of it was just figuring out how stuff worked. And that was a fun challenge. And that really kind of drove that like part of my youth. And then home labbing, I guess home labbing for me really started, excuse me, when I had gone into the world of professional uh, IT, and I was working with servers and I was responsible for things. It really ended up being the situation where I had all these servers, they were mine, I was responsible, and
yeah,
then when they reached their effective end of life, I was like, I can't throw my babies out.
yeah.
My babies. So, that stuff kind of came home with me and started filling up like used racks I found off Craigslist and things like that, and just kind of like ended up being this thing I took home. And then from there, the use of them kind of evolved into, where it is today, like learning how to do things and
Yeah.
self-hosting and all that stuff. So that's the arc, if you will, I guess.
Gotcha. It makes a lot of sense that I can relate to that a lot, especially the like not even realizing how much I was like choosing a career in this by like playing tinkering with toys as a kid, and then you're like, oh, I have always loved this, so I love that. But like you said about reusing gear, that's the best part of home lab, and kind of starts and like being a sysadmin and having to run all these servers. There's nothing better than like getting your own at home where you can be like, I'm unlocking it and I'm doing whatever I want because you can't play at
Yeah,
work.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, you don't get to test in production, so you
Yeah.
shouldn't be
You
testing in
shouldn't. Yeah.
production.
Yeah.
Yes, you shouldn't.
Yeah. That's the key word. Should. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I'm joking. What else I was going to say? Oh yeah, but the whole recycling. I liked that when I watched your video when you did the lab breakdown. I don't know how recent it was, but I think it was fairly recent. But there was one
Yeah.
server at one point you were just like, actually, this server, it was mine. I think it went to work with you or something, and someone decommissioned, and then it came back home with you eventually anyway.
Yeah, that was an interesting full circle event
Yeah.
where I worked at this company. I had been the person who acquired that for work, and it spent its 5 or 7 years on the clock doing work stuff. And then I had moved on to another company, and I have a friend who was working there, and he took it home when it was end of life, and he's like, here it is. Like, oh, my baby's
Oh,
come
yeah.
home, right? It's weird. But I think there's a lot of people who can relate to that too. It's just like,
Yeah. I love it. Yeah. If you love something, set it free. If it comes back, yeah.
and if it's a
Awesome.
Dell, 730 XD, well, then there you go.
Yeah, that's awesome. So moving on from like the start of the passion in your early career, you stepped into IT and you specialized in like security engineering, which is incredibly important and difficult because humans are very much involved, not just the tech.
Right.
Infrastructure architecture and system admin. So like, what was that journey like getting into that line of work?
Yeah, I think for a lot of people, and myself included, I was a kid who was just passionate and gifted, and I ended up working for a VAR, like a value added reseller,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like just a small computer shop, and way back then, gosh, I feel old when I say that, but back then it was less about worrying about security and maintaining stuff. It was more about like, you're going to be building a server and it's going to go into a courthouse, and got to make sure that when that hard drive fails, that it doesn't take their whole production down. So everything was really more about like just making sure things survived. Like
Yep.
uptime was the thing, and uptime is still the thing, right? But the difference was it was more about hardware failure or corruption than it
Mm-hmm.
was about like outside bad guys. And you know, it was also in a time where while the internet still existed, not everything was connected everywhere all the time, and so there was a big difference. And later on, starting there, and that's again, that's where a lot of people start. I know a lot of friends that I have that have, everybody kind of started working as an IT guy at a small company and moved on from there. And you know, in my 20s, later on, it was a lot about like trying to break into bigger companies. But in those times, if you didn't have a degree, then it was just assumed that you didn't have the skills to do the
Yep.
thing. And it meant more time on it took a longer arc to get to the places I am now, and certificates helped a lot back then.
Mm-hmm.
Nowadays certificates are less of a value, but back then it was like, okay, well, you know your thing. Here's a piece of paper that came from Microsoft that says you're an MCSE. We trust you now. Like
Yeah.
that was the thing. um but from there, now we jump into a completely new world where like it's not just the hardware, and it's not just about failure rates and stuff like that. It's about trying to really protect against the bad guys, making sure things are up to date, and trying to produce as much uh, wrappers around protecting
Mm-hmm.
stuff. And so that's been quite the difference in where I came from versus where we are these days, right? And that's, in many ways, that's just the normal progression of technology.
Yeah, yeah, I agree, and especially with security, they'll talk to people, and they always think that like the biggest holes in tech and all that are like is someone writing all these code or hacking you and everything, and it's like no, someone stole your keys and walked in behind. Like it's the human
Yeah,
factor of that makes it so difficult, and everything's all connected. Yeah, she's a wild world out there.
yeah, yeah, for sure. The people are a company's greatest asset and their greatest risk.
Yeah,
100% all day long. Yeah, that's the truth. We all, life would be so much easier if we just didn't have the users.
yeah, those
But then we don't have
pesky
jobs.
users. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
catch 22 there for
Yeah,
sure.
we say the same thing sometimes. I'm completely in jest, but it's like all those
Yeah.
goddamn customers. What do they want now? Oh
uh,
yeah. So you touched on some of that in the like doing stuff for the courthouse, but like what are some of the other primary responsibilities and just stuff you did throughout your journey going from job to job? Some of the stuff you did.
yeah, a lot of it, so my arc into that stuff was, earlier years were being the one IT guy to maintain an office full of like 80 people, and it was engineering. So a lot of it was more about focusing on the data integrity and making sure that like version control systems and stuff like that
Mm-hmm.
were functioning and secure and backed up. And backup was another, like that was the it's funny to think like a decade or so ago, like the biggest worry people had was like, is everything backed up? And
Yeah.
now it's like, is it everything backed up? Did you install your updates? How's your EDR? How's your CrowdStrike or your
Mm-hmm.
Sentinel One? Like, how are you protecting yourself? And so it's that whole progression has been a little bit like, I guess the world of like hardware manufacturing kind of got all of the, for the most part, like knock on wood, Intel CPUs and whatnot, but like they got all the little things, the little things that were causing problems, kind of
Yep.
resolved and squared away. So now we're worried about the human layer. Now we're worried about we're worried about the attack surface and the software, and less about the hardware in terms of stability and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, well said. Kind of like you mentioned, even building computers back in the '90s. It's just like now it's you just what's the best price? What should I use? What looks the
Exactly.
best? Before it was just like what actually works together. And but yeah, well said. You just don't worry about it. Like someone goes, oh, maybe the CPU's failing. I was like, CPUs don't fail anymore. Like there's something else in the server that's breaking. Like I've seen like
Hmm.
one bad CPU and it's not even the CPU. The pin was bent type of stuff. Like
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. So, but it's funny that you mentioned the Intel thing because they did get themselves in a little bit of trouble just recently with
Yeah. Their desktop CPUs. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's a rough deal. Hopefully they can recover and not end up in a
yeah
much
they're
worse situation. But
they're looking a little shaky right now, but well, we'll see.
hmm
We'll see.
yeah,
Anyway, so we'll take this time to start to transition too into the YouTube channel and everything. But what I wanted to ask you about is we know how you got into home labbing and the whole tech side, but what kind of
sure.
inspired you to start then contributing back to the community, sharing things, and then say, you know what, let's do a YouTube channel.
Yeah, the YouTube channel had an arc where it took me a while to get to that point. Like I always had this passion, but I didn't know in terms of YouTube what I specifically wanted. I knew I wanted to make technology content, but I
Hmm.
didn't know what it was. And I mean, this was like years ago at this point. And the long and the short was eventually I realized that there are people out there that have this same weird, maybe esoteric quirk that they like to do this stuff at home. Whether they just want to self-host and they want to do their stuff, or they are technology people who are building themselves a place to learn so they don't have to learn on the job, right?
Hmm.
That's and show up and be like, I know how to solve that problem because I've done it at home.
Yep.
That kind of home lab, and that was primarily where I ended up in the beginning. Like the self-hosting stuff kind of came a little bit later because it was more like I want to do the things I do at work and I want to do it myself, right?
Yep.
um,
My
but
rules.
yeah, well, and just like, can I do this edge case thing, and does it work?
Yeah.
Yes, no, and then troubleshooting your way through. It's like, wow, now I know how to do that thing. And it made taking tests and certifications much easier because I had a place to do it. Couldn't
Yeah.
But the community side of it really kind of opened up when I realized that, like, the greatest value that I had not seen was being able to like share this maybe esoteric passion of mine with other people who also share this passion, and then all of a sudden it just unlocked this world of, like, in the early days there weren't collections of people who were like into home labbing, right?
Hmm.
You'd run into somebody and you'd start talking work, whatever work might be in IT stuff, and then you mentioned, oh yeah, and I've got a server at home, and then all of a sudden their eyes would light up like, I've got a server at home too, and like that was the
Yeah.
connection you made with people back then. And now we've got, like, Two Guys Tech has a Discord, and there's a bunch of people that are in there that are all into it. There's Reddit, like there's like all these places that have coalesced to really solve that need to get people together, swap war stories, ask questions, show their things off, because there's a whole lot of pride and a lot of people like, I did this thing, I made this thing, and here it is, it's awesome. And that really is kind of a hugely empowering thing, and that's what I love the most about the stuff I get to do with YouTube and home labbing and just the hobby itself.
Yeah. That's awesome. It's so common. All the that is a very common story of the I don't know. I just started because it felt like the right thing to do, and then I don't know followed the views, followed the content, and followed your heart, and you get some
Yeah,
good stuff that way. So what you started Two Guys Tech with a partner with John Goodwin, correct?
right.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
that's true.
yeah, tell us about your how where's that relationship like? Did you work with him, and how'd that all start up?
Yeah, so in the early, like, geez, this was like 2016 era. Like, I knew nothing about videography. I knew nothing
Mm-hmm.
about editing. I just knew, like, I like to do a thing. And so uh, he has like a deep background in, like, photography and videography. And so, you know, I started it as just as like a hobby project with him. And again, we didn't really know what we were doing. We're just like, we want to make technology content. And, there was a lot of, this was a heyday time where I felt like there's a lot of inspiration from watching people like Jay's 2 Cents
Mm-hmm.
and maybe Linus back in the day. And just be like, yeah, I want to do that too. I want to share this passion I've gotten. And from there, it's kind of grown. These days, obviously, I'm solo in front of the camera most of the time. Just that's just the way things have kind of gone. John helps out a little bit with editing and some back end office stuff. So that's the way we are these days. But in the start, that was where we were, and just kind of trudged ourselves through it.
Cool. Yeah, same thing. So just on our side, making videos here, it was always Chris who's sitting on the other side producing this. Same thing, kind of. When we got hired here, boss came in, was like, start making some videos. All right, what do you want us to do? I don't know, figure it out. And then so I was like, all right, well, I'll talk. I'll come up with subject matter. Chris, figure out how we're going to record everything. So the journey of not both the topics and the production level was fun to
Yeah,
figure out together. Yeah.
yeah, that's nice.
Yeah, you need a partner. At least I did.
Yeah.
All right, so back to the YouTube and the content from the very beginning until today. So like your first video you guys ever made to what you're doing now. What would you say is the video that you're like the most proud of? Where you're just like, I'm glad I made that one. And then conversely, which one either you didn't love or it was like, oh, that was way more work than I thought it was going to be.
Yeah. When you have like, it's hard to like think all the way back in the beginning.
Mm.
So I think that I can like recent memory. One that I had knocked out last year was I realized I had never really made a like how to get into home labbing. Like how do you decide
Mm-hmm.
on your first piece of hardware? And so I kind of sat down and started thinking about how do I communicate some of these topics to people in terms of like the real nerdy stuff. Like we talk about form factors and CPU architectures and things like that, which you know aren't things that really easily can be consumed by people and help them be informed. So I started the process like, well, let's make a video where the premise is your this is your first home lab server, whatever. And but let's not just be like, go buy this thing and do a thing and off you run and have fun. It's
Yep.
more like, how do you make the right decision on what's right for you?
Mm-hmm.
And so I started with the basics. Like, let's talk about ARM and x86 architectures in a really high level way, right? Not to
Yeah.
be like, we're going to talk about pipelines, and we're like, no, we're not going to talk about. Let's just talk about the macro pros and cons of each
Yep.
and why you choose one over another. And so we started with that, and then gracefully moved into like form factors. Like people look at a computer if they don't work in IT and they look at a computer and they're like, well, that's a small one and that's a big one and
Yeah.
that one's flat, right? They're like,
That was
they're all different shapes of
and
the
that
same
one's in the
thing.
cloud. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, that one's in the cloud, exactly. So the whole idea there was like, okay, well, let's just talk about on a basic level, like PC form factors
Yeah.
and why you choose one over the other and what's the limitations or the benefits of like, do you want to buy a small one? Cool, it's lower power and that's a you can make a decision based on that. But if you want to be able to expand and you need uh, start looking at a large tower workstation, or we can talk about server form factor and go through all that process so that there's like a fundamental just a layer of understanding. And then from there, the second half was, let's go to eBay together.
Oh
let's
yeah, nice.
let's
Let's go
make a
shopping.
decision.
Yeah.
Yeah, let's go shopping. Yeah, because and this is what I found, this is why I like it
Yeah.
and what it's going to solve for me. Then buy the thing and get it home and build it together so that people could see the whole process end to end. And at the end, here's my platform and why I did this thing. Therefore, if it appeals to you, you can follow me exactly and from start to finish if you want. Or if you don't need that and you want something more simpler and turnkey, I help get you there. So that in retrospect, going back and looking at the video, I was really, really happy of the tone that I had set and
Mm-hmm.
the opportunity. And this is silly, but one of the biggest joys that I get out of all of this is when someone says, "Hey, I bought a computer based on this thing that you showed,
Oh yeah.
and I learned how to do this thing because of you." Like in the end, all we want is validation, right? We
Exactly.
want we just want somebody to say like, "You helped me," because
Yeah.
that's all. I don't want to make content for the sake of content. That's not my thing. I want to like have a piece of information that was provided to somebody that like sent them on a journey that got them where they wanted to go or
Yeah.
helped them learn something. And so seeing those positive comments are just like, yeah, okay, I did the right. That was a success. It doesn't matter what the view count is. It doesn't matter any of the like the generic YouTube metrics that say this one is a success based on, click-through rates and all this kind of stuff. But like if people are saying you helped me, then I was like, that's it. That's a winner. So I'm very proud of that one for that.
Love it. Yeah, I feel the exact same. I remember there's one video we did. It was about they updated something for version. I think it was like CentOS 7 or something. It was CTDB. It was for doing clustered Samba, like SMB window sharing, and they completely changed the syntax from one like minor version to another, which is a big no in my opinion. But they did it, and it was not well documented. Anyway, so I tirelessly kind of figured out what was broken about it. Anyway, we did it because it was our job and we had to fix it for the customers. But then made a YouTube video out of it. Mainly in my head, like you were saying, was that feeling of like, I wish someone made this. Like I wish this was here when I went through this. And then I think, it was like it was such a niche-y kind of topic that the view count wasn't very big. But just like you just said, there was a comment at one point, they're like, oh my God, you just saved my ass. And I was just like, yes, thank you. Yeah. So I completely relate. That's why we do it, to help other people.
Yeah. To make an actual impact. I 100% agree.
Yeah.
That's what it's about. But on the flip side, the draining one, or the most mentally or emotionally taxing, I actually, I'm going to phrase this slightly different. You asked for one, but I'm going to talk about like a string of stuff that led to it. So, and this really has to do with the Broadcom acquisition of VMware, because so that happens, right? The world's in an uproar, changes come out, I make a video about the changes. And when I started that process or made that video, it was like right in the middle of writing the script and like really looking into it. It dawned on me that my professional life is going to change in a perceivably bad way. And so all of a sudden it stopped being about like, I'm mad because, I'm a pro VMware guy, to like, I need to start thinking about where I'm going to take the company I work for's direction in life, in, with their data center infrastructure. And so it started with like, okay, this sucks, I'm unhappy, to like, this is foundationally changing, not just for the world, but for me. And that led to a string of like other videos that culminated in like evaluating different hypervisors and comparing them to VMware ESXi. And from an outside perspective, when someone watches videos like that, they see what's immediately in front of them. But behind the scenes, that's me just like coming to terms with and figuring out what I'm going to do as, an architect, that it's going to tell the company that I work for and others who ask me what to do with their stuff, just where to go with things. And so you're not just watching this is VMware, whatever. This is like, you're watching the guy like evolve in real time, trying to figure his shit out, so to speak, in front of everybody. And so, yeah, when that's over, you look back, you're like, man, sure, I walked away with a ton of information, and it was beneficial to a lot of people, and again, with the kudos and the positive stuff there, but like it turned into just kind of like a huge draining, life-changing time. And it was just all right there. And in retrospect, I'm like, oh, all that just happened there.
Yeah, the real world snuck in a little bit. That's kind of the nice thing about home labbing and stuff a little bit. You can kind of put the wall up and have fun, and then you're just like, oh, geez. Anyway, the rug pull of the corporate, because that's the like, I've always been a proponent. I love Proxmox. I love the way it works. I love XCPG and the open source. But man, VMware, great products. But yeah, that feeling you just described, we've heard it from a bunch of people being like, I just don't know where to go. And you're like, well, we can help if it's what's right for you.
Yeah. And the thing with VMware, not to belabor, is like the problem with that whole scenario is that they were the 800-pound gorilla in the market. And so at a certain point, I think that the silver lining, if we can just add a cherry on top of all that, the silver lining is that it gave Proxmox, it gave XCP-ng, and it gave a litany of other smaller hypervisors that are, KVM based and stuff like that, an opportunity to actually get some breathing room, to get some air, to be seen, and in a way that I think that wouldn't have happened otherwise. And so the silver lining to it is, this an era came to an end. That's a bummer, or maybe not, whatever. But the positive side is now these companies actually have room to grow, an opportunity to show their stuff in front of real customers and real people, and you guys know that very well.
Yeah, well said. I love that because yeah, it's is it a good thing? Is it a bad thing? I don't know yet, but it happened, and also it's a
That's the
lesson
thing.
that we got to stop trusting that that one piece of technology we've built everything on is always going to be there.
Yeah,
I can relate to that a little bit when we went through it when they discontinued CentOS. When Red Hat pulled the plug, well, pulled the plug on the downstream version of it, and at the
right.
time, 45 drives, like that was our like sole operating system that we built everything on top of. And I still remember the day when reading the release, and I was like, kind of what you described with the, oh, geez, this is going to change a lot. And then anyway, so Rocky comes up, Ubuntu. But the lesson here, people always, I think, really should take away from this, and I love the way you said it, where it's like, is it good? Is it bad? I don't know, but it happened, right? So spread your eggs around. Don't put them all into one basket. Yeah.
Yeah, diversify. That's the way to do it.
Diversify.
Right.
There it is. Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, so we're going to move on to one of our favorite segments here. We always kind of joked about it over here is the war stories. Like where we'd be at the end of the week or whatever, kind of sit back and be like, whew, that was a tough one. And you just tell stories about whether it's a particularly challenging experience in your tech field, creating a YouTube video. And the idea is one of those where you kind of walk in being like, yeah, this won't be that bad. And then you like leave a changed man at the end of it. Like, so from your
Yeah.
experiences anywhere in your career or your creation or anything, you got any good war stories to share with us?
No, never had a problem. I've always been 100%.
You liar. You're
Yeah,
a
I'm a
liar.
liar. Yeah. Yeah. I got to think back in my past, and was thinking one of a good example is being a young guy and being super impatient with technology back in the day. And so, there was a job that I worked on, and I mentioned earlier about like an engineering office, and company was part of a big multinational uh, corporation, and they were shipping code nightly between their ClearCase server, which is no one's even heard the name anymore. But this is way before Git and SVN in the world that we have now for source code management. But and uh, I had backups running on a box, and it was backing up this virtual machine, and I had a day's worth of like 40 engineers, all the churn, their check-ins, checkouts, all that kind of stuff is
Yep.
all held in there. And backup software failed the night before and left the virtual machines disks in a needing consolidation state, which
Gotcha.
meant, okay, I can't do any more backups, can't do anything until I fix this thing. So I kick it off. It's like 4 o'clock. I'm like, I want to get this done so I can get out of here.
Uh-huh.
Like normal guy going into 8 a.m. and trying to get out at 5. And consolidation took a long time. I'm like, well, look at the call. I mean, I got to get out of here. I don't want to sit around for this. And the backup's got to run tonight. So I, being an enterprise person, got in there and straight to the command line, and let's just kill this world. Let's kill this virtual machine and make it faster. Oh, now I can't start the virtual machine. Now the consolidation's running. Oh, I'm just going to clean out these consolidation files. We don't need them. We don't these check files. We don't need this one. And that led to the catastrophic failure of that virtual machine and all of the data that was in there. Unreferenced disks, and
Oh yeah.
just the sheer panic. And it was funny because at the time you all of a sudden your Google foo goes to like a 10. And you're
Yeah.
just like, I'm gonna find the answer. I gotta figure this out. I gotta get this back up. And and it's like charging close to 11 p.m. at this point. And about that time, the corporate parent comes online. They're in Germany. So I call up the engineering manager over there. I'm like, so this thing's happening, and right now you don't have any data, and I might need you to send all of the data down our little small network connection. And in typical German fashion, it's like, this is not good. And
Yeah.
I'm like, I know,
I
I know
know.
this is
Yeah.
not good. And I'm like, oh, and so the funny thing was the answer to solving that problem was the thing I should have done to begin with when I was over my skis, so to speak. And that's like,
Yep.
call for support.
Yep.
Like call the company and say, I did a thing, can I redo it? And so by that point, it was probably 3 or 4 in the morning, and I had finally gotten a hold of an engineer. And for him, it's just like, I didn't. I mean, at that time, I was quite green in what I was
Yeah.
doing in terms of that and virtualization, and problem solved. Kick the machine back on, And by the time the engineers that worked in my office came back to work, they were none the wiser. They
Yeah.
had no idea. Yeah, and I was a husk of a man by the time morning came around, and just like you learn lessons sometimes, and lessons aren't necessarily you don't know what you're doing, because you don't know what you're doing in a lot of
Exactly.
cases, but like maybe be a little patient, maybe
Yep.
let processes complete and walk away,
Oh,
and
yeah.
yeah.
And
So
don't be afraid to ask for help.
yeah, that's really a big thing, and you really don't know how important that is, assuming that you have the humility in
Hmm.
in your 20s. You're like, I can fix
Yeah,
anything.
exactly.
I'm a machine. Look at me. I can
Yeah.
do this. I can do it all. I do it all myself. And that there's some life lessons in there that still ring true for me as an adult, I
Yeah.
guess is the way I'd call it.
Yeah, that was awesome. That was a war story to a T. And you're exactly right about the engineers coming in the next day, none the wiser, and they're like, "Oh, what do you mean? This stuff always works?" And you're like,
Yeah,
"You don't even
exactly.
know."
That's the life of IT right
Yeah,
there.
the
Is
thankless
you know
job.
it is 100%. If they don't know something's wrong, then you're doing your job.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Yeah. Um,
yeah.
Anyway, all right, that was great. Thank you for sharing that. That was a good story, and I love that you ended with the lessons too. Sometimes we do that, and we don't always pull the needed, lesson from it. But that was great.
Yeah.
So we'll jump to our other kind of favorite segment we do. It was inspired by Jeff Geerling actually when we had him on, because he has things everywhere,
Hmm.
all kinds of cool toys. But the kind of what's beside you right now? You got any fun things on the desk? Anything you're tinkering with or anything like that?
Yeah. So I mean, I yes, I'm going to show you some of my overtly nerdiness here.
Yes.
So a long time ago, I started collecting these little guys.
No way. What is that?
This is so in the Intel Pentium 2 era, Intel's marketing campaign were these people dressed in, clean suits, or these bunny suits, right?
Okay.
And so
Yeah.
they made this whole line of marketing products that were like iridescent bunnies.
No way.
Like,
Look like
yeah, like
Teletubbies.
yeah, like little beanie baby sort of things, and they've got little anyway. And so at some point, I ended up like collecting all these things. Like I've got I've got like an old CPU, like an old Pentium 2 in
Yeah.
a box in the cellophane wrap, and like these things that you just collect over the years. And I think I even have a Windows 95 original eBay special that's still in the cellophane, that's in a
Oh, that's
closet. But like,
awesome.
yeah, so these little things, and adds a little bit of like levity and entertainment to what's a regular mundane day.
That's awesome. Cool.
Yeah.
Where did you even get your hands on those?
Good question. It started with, because I knew they existed, but in the stuff I did, I never got like I was never at conferences or anything
Yeah.
like that to have an opportunity to get them. And one day I took the family to the coast in Oregon, and we were in one of these like they call them antique shops, which they're basically these people just selling all manners of items.
Okay.
And one of them was sitting on a shelf in a coastal antique shop in, I think it was Lincoln City is the name of
Hmm.
the town, and it's just like there's a bunch of other like miscellaneous weird knickknacks, but none of it's technology related. I'm just like, I remembered those, and one turned into like a tribble thing where they just started to multiply. And at a certain point, like I think it was a birthday gift from my wife, like here's the whole set that
Nice.
came from eBay, and I was like, okay, now I have like seven of these things, and I need a place to put them. So they just like wander around and kind of meander around, and so yeah,
Oh, that's
just
awesome.
just weird. Yeah.
Oh, I love it. That's cool. That's really cool. Um, Thank you. All right. Well, let's continue on then. Let's talk about Proxmox, and in particular the hardware you have from us. You
Yeah,
have a Proxinator. I believe is it an 8-bay one or a 16-bay one?
it's a VM16.
VM16. Perfect. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, so video was great. Um, I know one of our service members here, Conlon, worked with you. He
Yeah,
had
he's an
he had
awesome dude.
he is an awesome dude. I
Yeah,
said
shout out to Colin.
shout out to Conlon. Yeah, he had a good time working with you. I went and talked to him about it. We always joke here, or at least I do. If he ever wants to do a different line of work, he'd be great at reading audiobooks. He's got such a Great
Oh,
voice.
really?
Yeah.
I'm gonna have to call that dude on the phone and hear his voice.
Oh yeah,
Have him read some
he's just
voiceover for me.
yeah. I can just picture him in like a leather chair and like yeah, just quietly reading a book. Yeah, he's hilarious. Anyway, great guy.
That's awesome.
But where I'm
Yeah.
going with that, Shotokan, like we said, you talked on your channel that one of the biggest things holding Proxmox back is the lack of support. Do you want to
Mhm.
expand on that?
Yeah, I let's take home lab Rich away and let's like
Love it.
IT professional Rich here for a minute. Um, I'm going to start out by saying that like Proxmox is a fantastic platform.
Hmm.
It really, I mean, it really is. This is not a condemnation of Proxmox as a viable enterprise virtualization solution. Um, but the biggest problem from a business perspective that Proxmox has, and why it's, in my opinion, and you're going to get anytime I bring up the name Proxmox, there's going to be people like you're wrong. So just hear me out, people. Is that the support that they offer for businesses is insufficient for, at a minimum, North America,
Yep.
at a minimum for the Western Hemisphere, because Proxmox Server Solutions is out of Austria, right there, and they're a fantastic company. But they're working within their support that they have, which is very much based on European time. And so when businesses go to look at alternatives or a virtualization platform for on-premise or whatever their needs are, one equally important component to whether it can do the job is, can I get support?
Exactly.
And what does that look like? And so, when 45 Drives announced the Proxinator and of course, you guys make good hardware. No one's going to ever argue that 45 Drives doesn't make fantastic hardware. And that's never been in question. But when you guys announced the Proxinator and announced we're going to be your licensing endpoint, we're going to be your support endpoint, all of a sudden you open up this massive market that didn't exist in North America and
Hmm.
arguably the Western Hemisphere, because you have people who might need to make a phone call at 3 o'clock in the
Hmm.
morning, and if the only response is your ticket will be answered tomorrow, in European Central Time or whatever, that that immediately takes it off the table and
Yep.
immediately moves that opportunity for them to really show that they can do the job. And so up until this point, frankly, I'm only speaking for myself here, but as a engineering professional, infrastructure engineering professional, like, it opened up the opportunity to actually have Proxmox enter the enterprise, the
Yep.
business, because not everybody's got that one guy who knows Proxmox end to end, does everything from the command line, laughs at the GUI, and you know, um, and I think that a lot of those people who believe that they can do that thing for a business forget that they would also like to have an evenings and weekends to
Exactly.
themselves too. Like, you need to be able to have a team, you need to have people to rely on, and you need someone to call.
Yep.
Harken back to the war story that I told, like, having somebody to call immediately, get the support you need, and that's the big thing, that the number one thing that your two components make, between the Proxinator and your support for Proxmox.
Awesome. Well, first of all, thank you. That was some very nice compliments there.
I don't work for you,
I
and this
know.
is not a marketing thing. This is purely like, until that point, it was not even on the table for a lot of people that I
Yep.
know. A lot of businesses that I work with are like, no, we can't. We're not going to do that. We're
Well,
not going to
it
do that.
was the same with us, and that's when we started this too. We were just like, well, we're going to have to support it, because I'll just touch on this a little bit. Our whole positioning of who we are at 45 Drives is we want to give open source flexibility and options to people with the good stuff that the legacy vendors give you. What's really the best part that the legacy gives you? Support. Everything you just described right there.
Yeah.
Stuff works, man. Like, we're so far along in the software defined world that stuff works generally pretty well. It's just knowing that I have someone to call, that single point of accountability that
Right.
people need before they sign off on that paper. Everything you just described. So that's why I said thank you, not necessarily for the compliments, but like validation that our market insight of what people really need is accurate. And we experienced the same thing with Proxmox. Like you said, uh, the engineers who build that product, it's awesome. I've used a lot of different software products that have bugs or breaks or stuff. I've never really run into something with Proxmox that has been fundamentally broken. Like, they're technically awesome that way. But they never gave that full end support that you described. So we always wanted to be that, because the other part of support that Proxmox will help you a lot with is usually deeper engineering, like level 5 complexity stuff. When some people just need some, like, my VM won't start, what do I do? Like, and that various level of there's an art and some challenge to running a service team being able to do that. So we take great pride on not just giving good hardware and giving solutions, but having people like Conlon and people that you can talk to on our service team that will help you through that process. So yeah, we agreed with you, and that's why we were just like, great, we'll be that tier 1 or the middle tier before Proxmox.
Yeah.
They don't like to talk on the phone either. Great people, but they don't like talking on the phone.
That's kind of a problem. But
yeah.
I mean, I get you.
So moving on. So like I said, loved the video. Great video. What pains or issues were you looking to solve by bringing this product into your workflow? I think I know the answer, but I'm teeing you up to tell everyone.
Yeah. There's actually a few. Like obviously the initial one, the obvious one was like, get away from Broadcom. Like, let's sever those ties and move on to bigger and better things. Mm-hmm. Also, the realities of what Proxmox really kind of provides in terms of things to solve is, everything that I had done up until this point professionally had always been virtual machines. Like, and I, full disclosure, I'm still a throw a VM at it kind of guy.
Yeah.
Because I mean, it's tried and true. I can control my boundaries. I can, this is encapsulation to the T. But there wasn't an opportunity to experiment with LXC, right? There wasn't an opportunity to experiment with the flexibility that Ceph can give you, right? That kind of stuff. And so all of a sudden there was this realization that, well, I can shove even more into and squeeze out more out of the hardware that we have that you couldn't do with virtual machines, because there's the loss of, dedicated RAM, dedicated, OS storage for each VM and that kind of stuff. So Ceph made a big, not Ceph, but LXC made a big difference in that. Like, you can changes the paradigm, right? It moves you closer to as much full utilization of the hardware and that you can get. And that's a big deal, especially when people are becoming more cost conscious with their infrastructures and looking to save money everywhere they get. And so telling them that you can do this and you can get even more density into your hardware is a big deal.
Nice. That's awesome. Yeah, I agree. And I liked your comment too about you're still a VM guy. I find one thing in this tech world, new tools come around and everyone goes, okay, we're going to containerize everything. And that can be good. Don't get me wrong. We use containers a lot, but sometimes there's nothing wrong with the good tried and true. Like, I think even with the cloud, cloud's here, let's put everything in the cloud. And you're like, well, let's have a good hybrid system or everything like that. But I'm with you. I still like making VMs. But
the flexibility. Sure. And I think that the flexibility, but also the thing about container workloads is that with all new forms of either virtualization or containerization, it's always like, let's see how we can make everything do this thing, right? And that's not the way to do it. Like, if you're going to use containers and you're going to use cloud resources, then they need to be cloud native. And that's not something that, and I think a lot of people just go, well, no, we'll just take the VM, we'll get rid of the operating system, and now you have LXC. What if we go further? What if we go deeper in Inception? Now let's just virtualize the application. Like, cool, that's great. Yeah. And you're whittling away even more of what you can do on the box in terms of like wasted resources. But the leap between being able to do that on your own and then shoving it into the cloud is I think that's why we see a lot of repatriation happening in the world. Like, people are rebuilding data centers. They're buying real gear, real iron, and they're putting it all back together, because just shoving things in the cloud was the bad idea. That was marketing.
Yeah, well, the marketing, they were right. The marketing worked.
It did.
And the other side that comes with that too is at a certain point, stop and be like, are we over-engineering this? Because a good engineered system is one that you can fix it when it breaks without too much issue. And a over-complex, over-engineered solution can often just be like, when it works, it's great. When it breaks, we just hope and pray it fixes itself, type of thing. And sometimes if you put enough layers of abstraction in, you get, you're a little closer to the metal, or this works or everything, but like, how much harder did you just make this to troubleshoot it and fix it and everything? And it's just all the things you have to balance, right?
Yeah, for sure.
So we'll end. I got one more question about your Proxinator and stuff. Like, so what is it doing? in your home lab? What's its job right now?
It's well, it has become the center point of everything that I'm doing. So you can split it into two halves. There's Two Guys Tech, the YouTube channel and content creation business that I have, right? And that is like all the video that's shot is passing through the Proxinator and Proxmox via either Nextcloud synchronization or it's managing VMs or doing shares. And there's just it runs my business, right?
Gotcha.
That's the first thing. So it is production. On top of that, also, and but separately, is it's also the thing that runs my home lab. So all the fun stuff that I get to do, the thing when I'm playing with stuff and maybe not evaluating or building virtual machines to test out some piece of software to make content on, like it's it's the place where all of the my self-hosting and home lab stuff happens, right? It is running the systems that serve the home, like keeping my kids safe, going to places on the net. Like it's doing DNS filtering, it's doing all these things, like it is this center point. Like I have a giant rack, but like this 1 2U box is like on a weighted scale is like 90% of everything that goes on there, right? So it's a big centerpiece to everything that I'm doing.
That's awesome. Cool. Well, I'm glad that's working for you. Um, all right, so we'll kind of move into the end. We've been going for about an hour here, so I just wanted to ask a couple other questions, almost more personal, not personal, whatever. But besides education and everything you do with Two Guys Tech and your business, any other hobbies that interest you that you would like to talk about or share?
Yeah, sure. I mean, like obviously intimated before, but like parenthood is a thing. I'm
Nice.
in the
Yeah.
throes of parenthood. That's a that's a journey unto itself, in a good way, mind you.
Yeah.
I'm also a big fan of like progressive rock. I used to
Cool.
play in bands as a kid, so
Yeah.
and I still
Producer Chris
drum.
just put
Like
his
I,
hands up like that. Yeah. He loves it. Him too. That's cool.
yeah. So
Sorry to interrupt. Keep going.
yeah, no, absolutely. And so like that's the stuff that like if I'm not like doing the churn of creating media or being a dad and that kind of stuff, like still love myself some Porcupine Tree and stuff like that. So I'm, that's probably the
Cool.
other dimensions to life. Yeah.
That's awesome. Um, yeah. So, okay, now with the crystal ball looking into the future, any predictions for the future of home labbing, storage virtualization? What's the next big thing that's going to really shake the world up?
I I shake the world up. That's tough. I have a
Shake your
prediction
world up,
that
maybe.
well, I think that home labs, as they pertain to people like me and others who have real iron, is going to change dramatically. And the reason being is that both AMD and Intel, are producing hardware CPUs that just consume just a boatload of power.
Power. Yep.
And on top of that, you have to cool those things. And yes,
Mm-hmm.
they are super energy efficient when you're not doing something, but when you're doing heavy workloads, holy cow, right? Like
Yeah.
it just yeah. And so I think that we are nearing the point where, unlike the old days, so to speak, where your Intel Xeon was just a slightly better, more robust version of a consumer processor,
Yep.
and you've moved to, well, this Sapphire Rapids CPU is now consuming like roughly 500 watts of TDP, right? You just realize that you won't be doing that in 3 to 5 years from now. I don't think you'll have real servers with real CPUs. So I think that that's going to end, which leaves a huge gap. And I think that this is, again, not a plug for 45 drives. And I think that what's going to happen is that, and you guys have seen it with your 45 home lab,
Yep.
but I see that the market is going to seize on that niche that'll open up, and there'll be a need for. There's always the people who are going to take an old gaming PC and turn it into a home lab machine, and I'm not discounting that at all. More power to them. And then there's also the prosumer like enthusiast groups who are people I think that like myself and I think you too, where like I want more power, I want flexibility, I want all these things. I don't want a 240-volt circuit in my house
Yep.
pulling down 30 amps, right? So you end up in this situation where you have to find a middle ground that serves that. And I think that you guys have already just released recently a major product that leans into that, specifically purpose-built hardware for home labbers
Yep.
that kind of fills that niche. And I think that that's where the big change will happen is there's more focus, more realization from hardware manufacturers and vendors that they realize that there's a enthusiast group here that's underserved.
Yep.
And so I think that's where we'll see the big change.
Well
So
said.
that's my prediction, honestly.
I love it. That was a good one. Yeah, I agree with you. And even your comment about the energy efficiency and how much power, it's something our engineering team, like, we put CPUs in these things in the past, and like you wouldn't have to think much about cooling them or like getting the airflow right, because they just. But like some of these new CPUs we're seeing, the amount of power they'll suck. You got to be really, really, really careful and creative about how you're venting heat, and your thermal design becomes that much more important. And one thing that we've done here, and that AMD is doing well, that I've yet to see Intel catch up on, is the 8004 series AMD CPUs to go with the 9004 they have. So like they got their big power suckers, but they're trying to do a really dense core but as minimal power as possible and still get the job done. Yeah. So that's nice to see. And ARM, these dense ARM CPUs, like they're coming. Like it's a whole different architecture, so there'll be some portability change thing there. But I agree on the low power thing. Even as we talk to other customers and other peers in the industry, they're all like, yeah, big and fast or big and powerful. That's cool, sure. But we're way more into the like well optimized, well engineered. So yeah, I agree with you. World's changing.
Yeah. It is, and power's not getting any cheaper.
Nope.
You know,
and whatever they have, they need for GPUs.
Yeah, exactly. That's going to be the big consumer, right? And one of the biggest criticisms that I get in a lot of the videos that I will make from people, and rightfully so, mostly people in Europe are like, my power is nowhere near as affordable as yours. Mm-hmm. And I'm over here going, look at this rack of servers. Yeah. And it costs me money. Like it's definitely a hobby that has a dollar value attached to it every month. But, you know, at a certain point, it's all going to fall down, and then there's a compromise to be made there.
Yep. Anyway, I like it. Good prediction. I think you're right. We'll move on to, you got any upcoming projects, collabs with people you want to share? Any plugs like that?
Yeah, I just simply next project for me is going to be now that my world is Proxmox, really leaning into how to back up and protect my workloads. Mm-hmm. So there's going to be a few videos that I'm actively working on right now that evaluate what is available, not just PBS as it stands, because that seems to be the de facto, like this is here, go use it. But now that you have enterprise backup from Veeam,
exactly,
like you have this opportunity now to really grab more market share, because, you know, I don't think a lot of people realize that like enterprise backup for a business is almost as important as the hardware and software platform you choose, because you've got years of backups that you need to be able to maintain.
Yeah, that backwards compatibility.
Yeah, and there's no way to move it other than to like reconstitute it and then reback it up. But then you don't have the clock times change. So, so that's the next projects for me. The other thing is, you know, earlier this year I soft launched another sub brand called Home Lab Gear that was kind of born out of me like looking at my workbench downstairs, my server rack downstairs, and seeing like all these hard drives and DIMM modules and just laying around everywhere. And every time I was making videos, I was like, oh, I don't have this part, and end up buying it. And then when the video ships, I'm like, oh wait, here it is. Yeah. Cool. So building products that help organize the life of a home labber and all the junk. So that's been really taken off too, which is awesome. I'm glad that I'm, you know, the biggest compliment anyone can get when they like make a product, and, you know, what I designed, 3D printed, and the whole process is my own, is getting a where someone comes back and purchases again and says, I want more of those things. Yep. So that's awesome. So yeah. And then, you know, the collabs, like plugged in with a lot of great people like Jeff, like Tom.
Yep.
You know, and so like you just get the opportunities here and there all the time to have a good collab when it comes.
Yeah, the YouTube creator circle is a friendly bunch once you get in. Hanging out with Tom Lawrence is always fun. Cool. Well, with that, I think we'll sign off. So I want to thank you again so much for joining. This was great chat. Thank you for all your stories. And you can find all of Rich's content, social media websites, Actually, you know what? Why don't you plug it? Where can I find? Where's your socials, YouTube, all that? Because I will get it wrong.
Okay, so pretty simple. Two Guys Tech at the number two guys GYSTEK, um, and like YouTube. Two Guys Tech.tv is the website, which also is kind of like basically a list linking of where you can find everything. Really just started to embrace Blue Sky. So
Okay,
if you're not a Blue
cool.
Sky user, go get on Blue Sky and you'll find us there. And a lot of technology people are moving to
Yeah,
there as
I'm
well.
hearing
So
that.
um, Instagram, all that. I mean, you kind of have to be everywhere, but
Yep.
primarily YouTube and yeah.
Yeah, you'll branch out from there. The home lab gear that you were just talking about for organizing and stuff. Where can we find
Right.
that? Because I'm interested for our own lab here in this building.
Awesome. So homelabgear.shop. So HOMELABGEAR.shop.
Perfect.
And
Okay, check
and
it out because I
yeah,
know I'm going to.
yeah,
All right,
yeah.
and what's
I will ship you internationally if you want.
nice?
Cool.
Perfect. All right. Well, and with that, I think we'll sign off. So everyone, thanks for joining us. That's what's spinning here at 45 Drives.